Hello everybody, welcome to the Whiskey Dictionary. Today we're going to be talking about the Knob Creek 12-year-old. Now, Knob Creek is a brand that barely needs an introduction, but you might not have known it's named after a creek that was running very close to where Abraham Lincoln grew up, and that's where the name comes from. So, interesting little fact. But when we're talking about the 12-year-old, we're talking about a whiskey that has only existed for about 5 years. This was originally introduced at the end of 2019 in very limited quantities as kind of a special edition thing, and people loved it. So then in 2020 it became part of the core lineup. But I have always had this preconception when it comes to Knob Creek, because I had it very early on when I started drinking whiskey, that it was very oaky. And if you don't love oak, like many beginner whiskey drinkers don't, or even people that have been drinking for a long time, oak just might not be your thing. I always go into this with a preconception that it's going to be very oaky. So when I tried the 12, I was actually delighted that it is not overly oaked. But with an age statement that high on a bourbon, you get a little worried. That being said, let's get into the nosing and the tasting and see how this came out. So the first thing that you're getting on the nose is very obviously caramel. It's kind of got this, I would call it like the holy trinity of bourbons. You have caramel, vanilla, and oak. Now the oak is not terribly strong on the nose here, which is wonderful. It's more leaning into that sweetness. And at a 75, 13, 12 mash bill of corn, rye, and malted barley, it makes sense that it would smell pretty sweet. But some of the other things that you're getting off the nose are going to be chocolate and cherries. And those are also fairly common in whiskeys. However, I think that they're fairly common because things like Knob Creek have made them like a prevalent thing, prevalent institution in the world of bourbons. There's a little bit of a toasted nut flavor going on here, not like what Jim Beam has. It's not like peanuts. It's more of a hazelnut, walnut, cashew, something just kind of like a bar nut mix, I guess. In addition, it has cinnamon, a little bit of tobacco, and a little bit of clove, probably coming from the rye. All right, let's go ahead and have a taste. Cheers. And while I let that kind of sit, so this is a 100 proof whiskey, which does not drink that way, and we'll talk about that. But when you have 100 proof whiskey, oftentimes it can burn. But I don't know, 100's an interesting number. I feel like people who put out whiskeys at 100 proof are doing it to have the 100. It may very well be that that's how it tastes the best, but I feel like they just want that third digit. Otherwise, why not do 102 or 101 like Wild Turkey? In this case, it's 100. It's 50% ABV. And it doesn't taste overly alcohol. It's very smooth. It tastes like cinnamon butter and a little bit of oak. Cinnamon, butter, vanilla. Little raisiny, maybe some figs. It's leaning heavier on the dark side. Chocolate isn't coming through on the taste so much for me. It did on the nose, not on the taste. Brown sugar. I think that buttery flavor I was getting at first is actually more akin to like a brown sugar butter. It's very good. Everything about this, the sweetness is perfectly balanced. The oak isn't overbearing. The flavors it presents are delicious. And it tastes almost like a bourbon syrup. It's really, really delicious. Now the price point, at least near me, is between about $60 to $65. And for a 12-year-old bourbon, which most bourbons don't even carry a age statement, or at least nothing this high, that was a surprise. I could see them going up higher if it wasn't Knob Creek. If you found like just some MGP sourced thing that was like 12 years old, oh my god, it'd probably cost $130. It's just so silly. But I appreciate Knob Creek keeping the price low, because it lets us try this stuff. Now, as I mentioned, originally released in 2019, 12 years old. Everything about this is just kind of perfect. I really, really enjoy this 12-year-old. And I would very much suggest that you buy it for $60 to $65. If you like it, you'll love it. If you don't like it, it will mix perfectly well in a cocktail. There's really no downside. If you can spring for $60 for a bourbon, I'd absolutely say you should do it. All right, thank you very much for joining me here on the Whiskey Dictionary. I hope you have a great rest of your night. Cheers.